CBS News national security correspondent David Martin is at the Pentagon, and Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is in New Jersey. David, I'd like to begin with you. In a statement on Wednesday, Defense Secretary James Mattis issued his own warning to the North Koreans, telling Kim Jong-un to stand down and take heed of the Security Council's vote to impose new sanctions on the regime. Where does the Pentagon stand on the Commander-in-Chief's threats of, quote, fire and fury?
Well, the statement by Secretary of Defense Mattis was pretty specific about what fire and fury would mean, because he warned North Korea not to take any actions that would result in the end of the regime in North Korea and the destruction of its people. That's about as specific a warning as you're likely to hear from a Secretary of Defense to a country that we are not engaged in hostilities with.
And Major, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson adopted a different tone Wednesday, assuring Americans that they can, quote, sleep well at night. Additionally, he said that he hasn't spoken to Chinese officials in days. What is the administration's position on a diplomatic resolution to this crisis?
Well, let's put Rex Tillerson's comments in some context. What he was saying about Americans sleeping well tonight is that the United States is fortified in the Pacific, can handle anything that might come its way from North Korea in a conventional or nuclear context, and did not detect any particular threat to Guam, even though the North Koreans issued a statement along those lines. So what Tillerson was trying to do is say nothing is imminent, nothing is happening that suggests either Guam or any other part of the United States territories or the United States mainland is in any way jeopardized by this increased rhetoric between the United States and North Korea. As for the Chinese, it is somewhat clear now that what the administration intends to do is let these remarks from President Trump, which were more amped up than his national security team expected, will sort of soak in the region and put everyone on notice that the president's not only trying to shift the conversation away from how vulnerable is the United States to what are the risks North Korea faces and what are the risks that might visit themselves upon the region if this gets out of hand, if this goes to military confrontation. Because it is obvious the president has grown weary of working through both the diplomatic niceties and the language around that and the sort of procedures of dealing with the Chinese, the South Koreans, and the Japanese through back channels and regular channels of communication. So as stark as this rhetoric was, the advisors we're talking to here indicate that it was meant to sort of shake everybody up a little bit and say this is a real situation. And the president's intentions are clear. A nuclear-capable North Korea that can threaten the United States is unacceptable, and military options are altogether too real.
David, the Pacific Air Force Command tweeted Tuesday night about airmen arriving in Guam with the hashtag #FightTonight for training missions with Japanese and South Korean forces. Can you tell us more about these exercises?
Well, Fight Tonight is the motto of U.S. forces in Korea, the point being that North Korea has the capability to launch an attack almost without warning, so that U.S. forces have to be ready to go without warning. And now that includes these bombers that are based on Guam, which is about 2,000 miles away from Korea. For many years now, long-range bombers, B-1s, B-52s, and B-2s have been cycling through Guam and conducting missions over the Korean Peninsula, very visible missions, which are one, meant to reassure South Korea that the U.S. will come to its defense if war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, and two, warn North Korea that the U.S. has considerable capabilities to wreak havoc on North Korea. Right now, it happens to be a squadron of B-1 bombers who are rotating through there, but after those B-1s go back to their home base in the United States, there'll be another set of bombers that deploys to Guam.
And finally, Major, we heard from Senator Rubio in your piece. Do we have a larger sense of how members of Congress are feeling about these tensions with the North Koreans?
Well, certainly they're alarmed by it, and a good number of Democrats have released statements or appeared on television criticizing the president for using rhetoric that, to their minds, unnecessarily aggravates the situation, saying it's not helpful, that it's escalating, and that it's dangerous with somebody who is as unpredictable as the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. And Senator John McCain, a Republican from Arizona, yesterday was mildly critical of the president, saying he ought not to make threats he's not going to carry out. But today you began to see a bit of a retrenchment on the Republican side. Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, and others saying what the president was doing was sending a very strong and tough signal to the North Koreans, as I mentioned earlier, about the risks involved and what the United States will not tolerate. And they said, absent that strong message, things could be somewhat misinterpreted on the North Korean side. And it's worth pointing out, this is not the first instance, and it will surely not be the last, in which President Trump agrees on a general tone with his senior advisors and then puts that tone in very stark language, uniquely his own.
All right, Major Garrett and David Martin, thanks to you both.